Hafaday, Gwahusi, Farron Taijeron, and we are going to talk about results from our study on perceptions of wildfire and wildfire management. Methods included surveys and interviews. We had 189 responses, which was convenience and snowball sampled. Interviews included a key informant who is a cultural practitioner and lifelong resident of Southern Guam, and an expert interview with someone from Guam Forestry. The survey asked residents how they think wildfires are started. As you can see, the graph is much heavier on the right side, which is a good thing. It indicates that residents at least know that most fires are caused by people. But still, only a minority at just over 30% know that wildfires are 100% human caused. That 100% number comes straight from Guam Forestry, and it is the only fully correct answer to this question. As such, it is where we'll be focusing most of our attention. This graph represents the overall average across the survey, and next we'll be looking to see if age, education, or village play a factor. Here, respondents are broken down into age groups. Each cluster represents 100% of its own group. For example, if you look at the little black bar on the right end of the 50 or over group, you'll see that 25% of them think that wildfire is 100% human caused. If you look at the little blue bar on the left side of the same group, you'll see that 2% of them think wildfire are 100% natural. The smallest group here had 35 respondents, so we shouldn't expect any outliers to skew the data heavily, even within groups. Looking at the black bars going across the graph, there is a sort of peak with the group in their 30s. It's my generation, the millennials, scoring the best with 41%, while all other groups were in the mid to high 20s. The big takeaway here is that not one group had a majority that correctly identified the cause of wildfire on Guam as being 100% man-made. And you'll see this is a recurring theme. Here, respondents have been clustered by education level. Again, all groups are weighted toward the correct answer with those black bars on the right sides, but still no group has a majority with the best answer. The closest is university graduates with 39%. And if you look at the some college cluster, you'll see a little bit of blue. That means someone there thinks that wildfires are 100% natural. So I'm guessing someone didn't take their Bio 100 general ed yet. And while we're here, we should note that 48% of all respondents reported having a bachelor's degree or higher. So this sample is somewhat optimistic of what we can expect to extrapolate to the population in terms of education level. In this slide, respondents were grouped by where they say they are from on Guam. The question in the survey was intentionally vague to allow for respondents to report the region they identify with most. Again, no group has a majority with the correct answer, though people from the South scored the best. And by the way, the image on the left is a heat map of all the wildfires on Guam from 2015 to 2020. So in looking at it, it makes sense to see this relationship that gets more accurate as you go south. Moving on to other questions, we wanted to see how people think wildfires affect the environment. On this graph, we want to look at the left side of each group at the light blue columns, which indicate respondents who think wildfire is very bad for soil health. While no group achieves a majority with the best answer, every group does have a majority that says wildfire is bad overall if we add the very bad and somewhat bad columns together. The key informant interviewee said he heard burning was good for soil because it reintroduces the nutrients back into the soil, but he was skeptical of this claim. According to the expert interviewee, by definition, wildfire is bad, period, on Guam, and that such uncontrolled burns kill the microbial network in the soil, which is crucial for nutrient transportation. It's also worth noting a distinction between fire, wildfire, what people think are controlled burns and what are actually controlled burns. So we're just talking about wildfire right now. Looking by region of residence, again, no group has a majority recognizing the wildfire effects on soil health as being very bad, but also every group has a majority thinking there's an overall negative effect if we add the very bad and somewhat bad columns together. Also note the short dark brown columns, which indicate a few responses of people who think wildfire is very good for soil health, just as a point of comparison. We asked respondents who think how they think wildfire affects reef health. And thankfully, every age group has a majority that recognizes that it's very bad for reef health. I think we can presume respondents had a ridge to reef affected mind, as they likely thought of this question and answer in terms of erosion and sedimentation. In other good news, not a single respondent answered that they thought wildfire is very good for reef health. And here we can see similar results by region. In this case, we can see a slight trend that increases in accuracy as we head north to south, which again makes sense since they have so much accessible coastline and you can see the water from the road in a lot of places. Moving on to questions about people. The survey asked if you or someone you know has had property damage from wildfire. Surprisingly, only 67% of respondents answered no. I personally expected this number to be bigger, and I certainly did not expect the cumulative third that answered yes. Admittedly, there may be a selection bias here where people who have been affected by wildfire were more likely to respond. We asked respondents who answered yes to elaborate on the damage, and here are some of their comments. The first casualty that stood out was canopies, which makes sense since they're made of petroleum products usually and also have a large surface area. And we also asked people to include an estimate of the damages, and you can see a $300 number there. Here you can see the damage is both more serious and expensive as people lose their crops. I summed all the reported cost estimates that respondents wrote in and got $32,000 in damages from just 7% of respondents, which in this sample is only 14 people. That $32,000 figure doesn't include comments like these nor others, which gave no cost estimate. You can see there was a complete wipeout, half a wipeout, and another complete wipeout, all from wildfire. Next, we asked respondents if they or someone they know required medical care related to wildfire. Thankfully, 96% of respondents didn't need nor knew anyone that needed medical care caused from wildfire. However, 1% or 2 people from the survey said that they had to see a doctor. Likewise, we also asked respondents to elaborate if they had a yes answer. A few comments mentioned smoke inhalation, which is the expected medical issue, as opposed to direct burns, fortunately. Unfortunately, smoke inhalation can be quite serious for manumko and or people with asthma. A couple comments read, my grandma had asthma and she needed her nebulizer more. I had asthma attacks that I couldn't relieve by myself and had to go to the doctor and was put on steroids. As wildfire is 100% caused by people, we thought we'd ask if there's a cultural component to its use. In this survey, a 62% majority of respondents said that wildfire is not at all a part of their culture. According to the key informant interviewee, he said he wasn't sure. And by that, he could think of a couple of uses for wildfire, including clearing land and for hunting deer, but he's not sure if he could quite call those part of our culture. And I quote, fire has cultural practices around it, but not wildfire, except possible deer hunting, he added in a moment of reconsideration. We also asked respondents to provide their ethnicities. Looking at just those who reported to be at least part Chamorro or Guamanian, we find a similar distribution to the previous graph. And here a total of 23% of Chamorros, ranging from very little to very much, said that wildfire is a part of our culture. And this to me seems like there may be more research needed to understand and or change that perception. Moving on, we asked respondents which government agencies they think regularly fight wildfire. Not who should, but who actually does. The survey included a list of the above agencies as well as a write-in section. Predictably, a 90+% majority chose the Guam Fire Department. Less predictably, 35% of respondents chose Guam EPA. The list as it appeared in the survey was in alphabetical order, which may at least partly explain the surprise to see this result. I texted a friend at EPA just to be sure, asking if they do fight wildfire, and he replied, nope, not us. And in any case, we're just really concerned if people can correctly identify the two primary agencies, which are the Guam Fire Department and the Department of Agriculture, which includes the Forestry and Soil Resources Division. Amazingly, just over half of respondents are aware of forestry's firefighting operations. A few people even wrote in Guam Forestry. And I think this is a big win that shows forestry's outreach and Instagram efforts are paying off, especially considering that they've had around or less than a dozen forestry aides at a time for years now, and not even all of them fighting wildfire. On the note of outreach, we asked people if they've seen any. Happily, a 71% majority say yes, ranging from a little to a lot. We asked yes respondents to elaborate, and out of 128 comments, the 3 most frequently mentioned ways people get information are from social media, news media, and in-person outreach. Although it's unclear how much or little overlap there is between the news and social medias, since the newspapers also post their stories online. Some respondents really elaborated, and their feedback is awesome. Of the 40% of comments which answered that they get their information from social media, they make mentions to Instagram, and specifically to forestry's Instagram. There's also a couple of Facebook mentions too. Less common means include incidental communication like the radio, text alerts, and a commercial at a gym, which sounds like an interesting thing to try and watch when you're trying to lift weights. In-person events include tree plantings, forestry's outreach, booths. And while the survey did not ask for this, a few people chose to include take-home messages, as they recalled it, regarding wildfire. There's damage to the reef, erosion, and habitat loss. A couple examples. Most of the longest comments evidently came from teachers. So a big shout out and thank you to them for being so involved and leaders on this issue. And here is every comment that makes a specific mention to a program or campaign. There's a few Mga Masong Iguahans and even a Ridge People Reef mention, which makes me happy. So some of the big takeaways, a majority of Guam residents still don't know that every fire on Guam is 100% caused by people. When we're communicating about wildfire, I think we could definitely loop in the human aspect of it. You know, just 14 people reported $32,000 in damages, especially farmers. 1% of the sample, which is less than 200 people, needed to see a doctor from smoke inhalation from wildfire. So it is affecting people's property and health. And then maybe my favorite takeaway is that, you know, most residents said that wildfire is not at all a part of our culture. But I definitely think there's a lot more room to explore in there in another study. Thank you.